She said she'd torch it with us inside, my mother said into the karaoke microphone, and 32 people at our Halloween party went quiet. 3 days later, my parents called the police and said I had threatened to burn down their house. Because of that lie, I was removed from the only place I was sleeping, put on unpaid leave at my job, and lost a $1,950 apartment deposit I had already scraped together. Then a woman I had never met walked into a room on a Thursday afternoon, opened a file, and read one sentence that made my father stop halfway through my name. Before I go on, please take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if you genuinely connect with this story, and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is there. I always love seeing where you're all listening from. My name is Brooke Elaine Mercer. I'm 24 years old. Now let me take you back to Lakeland, Florida on Saturday, October 28th, 2023. My parents, Denise and Alan Mercer, threw a Halloween party every year, even though neither of them actually liked people. They liked the audience part. They liked being the house on Easton Drive with the lit pumpkins lined up evenly on the brick steps, the cider station, the fake cobwebs stretched exactly the same way across the front shrubs, the Bluetooth speaker hidden in the dining room hutch so it looked effortless. My mother taught third grade for 19 years and had the voice of a woman who had spent her whole life being obeyed in fluorescent rooms. My father sold commercial roofing systems across Polk County and had the kind of calm, slow tone that made people think he was reasonable before they realized he was just practiced. At that point, I was living at home again, which was humiliating in a very specific way. Not the dramatic failure kind, the logistical kind, the kind where your hours get cut at work in June. Your old roommate gets engaged and moves to Tampa in July, and suddenly the only practical choice is putting your entire life back into 12 banker boxes and carrying them into the room with the beige carpet you picked when you were 15. I worked front desk at a dental office on South Florida Avenue called Miller and Kwan Family Dentistry. I made $19.25 an hour, plus occasional overtime if two hygienists were out, and I stayed late to finish insurance verifications. I was trying to save enough to move into a one-bedroom near Lake Hollingsworth by January. I had $14,812 saved. I know the amount because I checked it every Sunday night. It was in a joint account at Suncoast Credit Union that my parents had opened with me when I was 17 for convenience, and then never bothered to remove themselves from because every time I brought it up, my mother said, "You're making a simple thing theatrical." That is how they talk when they are about to do something ugly. They make your concern sound like your flaw. By October, I had started apartment hunting seriously. On Wednesday, October 25th, during my lunch break, I put down a $1,950 holding deposit on a small upstairs unit at Grove Park Apartments on Hardin Boulevard, Building 6, Unit 214, 680 square feet, gray vinyl floors, a cheap, brushed nickel faucet in the kitchen, and a laundry room that smelled like hot dust. I loved it instantly because it was quiet. I had not told my parents yet. Not because I was hiding it exactly, more because I had learned that every happy thing was safer before it touched their mouths. The Halloween party started at 7. By 7:20, the whole house smelled like cinnamon candles, beer, and the burnt sugar edge of those grocery store frosted cookies my mother always bought and arranged on a black tray, like she had baked them herself. There were 32 people there by my count, because checking numbers is how I stay calm. Neighbors from Easton Drive, two women from my mother's school, my father's friend Mark Hensley and his wife Rita, my cousin Aubrey and her fiancé Noah, my younger brother Chase, who was 21 and lived in an off-campus apartment in Winter Haven, came dressed as a referee and spent most of the night pretending he did not notice tension unless it involved him directly. I was wearing a black sweater dress, tights with tiny moons on them, and plastic devil horns from Target because I had worked until 5:30 and did not have the energy to be elaborate. Around 8:10, somebody suggested karaoke because my mother always turned even casual gatherings into little trials people were expected to pass. She loved the microphone, loved how it formalized a room. At 8:43, after two bad country songs and one deeply committed rendition of Total Eclipse of the Heart, my mother took the microphone to say something funny. I remember the exact time because I had looked at my phone right before to answer a text from my friend Talia about whether I wanted the white IKEA cart she was giving away. My mother smiled at the room and said, "This is our daughter Brooke, in case some of you have not met her. She still lives with us at 24, but she does have opinions. A few people laughed because that is what people do when they are handed a script and do not realize they are in it. Then she turned slightly, looked directly at me, and said, "If you do not like our rules, do not come crying when you end up sleeping in your car." The room changed temperature. You know that feeling when a room goes from social noise to witness silence in one sentence. It was like that. I could hear the fake fog machine in the front hall sputtering. I could smell candle wax and pumpkin spice creamer warming in a crock pot by the coffee station. Noah looked down at his cup. Rita Hensley gave the small frozen smile women use when they want not to be involved. I said, "Okay, that was all." I did not argue. I did not cry. Instead, I put my drink on the kitchen counter, took my horns off, and went into the half bath off the hallway to breathe for exactly 45 seconds. When I came out, my Aunt Celia was standing by the coat rack. She was my mother's older sister and the only person in that family who ever looked uncomfortable when my mother performed cruelty. Celia kept one hand on the strap of her purse and said very quietly, "You should move your money before you tell them anything." I just looked at her. She swallowed and added, "Do it Monday morning, not online, in person." Then she walked back into the party before I could ask what she meant. If you have ever had that moment where you know everything is about to change and you do not know why yet, you know how your body handles it before your mind does. Your skin goes cold first, your stomach drops second. The explanation always arrives later. Stay with me because what she knew turned out to matter more than anything my parents said that night. The party ended a little after 11. I helped carry trash bags to the garage because that was expected, and my mother behaved as if nothing had happened. She gave leftovers to neighbors in clear plastic containers, kissed cheeks at the door, and thanked everyone for coming in that smooth voice of hers. My father stacked folding chairs in the dining room and did not look at me once. At 11:56 from my bedroom, I texted Talia, "Can I come by tomorrow?" She replied at 12:01, "Yes, bring coffee and gossip." I brought the coffee. What I did not bring was the actual reason. On Monday, October 30th at 9:12 in the morning, I walked into Suncoast Credit Union on South Florida Avenue with my driver's license, my account number, and a printout of my new apartment reservation. The lobby smelled like carpet cleaner and those cheap peppermints in a glass bowl. There were 3 people ahead of me, one old man depositing checks, a woman with a toddler, and a contractor in dusty boots asking about wire limits. The branch manager's name was Layla Romero. She had silver nails and navy cardigan, and the exact expression of someone who had seen families do strange things with money before. I told her I wanted to close the joint savings account and move everything into a new account in my name only. She asked if both parties were required. I said, "I was told because I am listed as a primary owner, I can withdraw my funds." She nodded slowly and said, "You can. But before we do that, I want you to understand your parents may receive an alert if they have mobile banking enabled." I said, "That is fine." It was not fine, but I needed it done before I lost my nerve. The total balance after pending interest was $14,819.40. I moved $14,800 into a new account and left $19.40 in the old one because Lila said closing it entirely could create a different notification trail if there were linked bill pay settings. She printed both receipts. I asked for stamped copies. She gave them to me and slid them across the desk in a blue folder. Then, almost as an afterthought, she said, "For your records, there was an attempted online transfer request on Friday evening for $6,000, but it did not process because the session timed out." I felt my face go hot. I asked her to print that too. She did. Friday, October 27th, 8:57 p.m. That was during the Halloween party setup, while I had been upstairs curling my hair with my bedroom door closed. The request had come through a device I did not recognize. It had not completed because the verification text was sent to my phone. I remember staring at the page and thinking, so that is what Aunt Celia knew. I drove straight from the bank to work. The office was cold as usual because Dr. Kwan believed 71 degrees was cleaner. The waiting room smelled like mint fluoride and the lemon disinfectant wipes we used on every clipboard. I sat at the front desk and smiled at patients and verified benefits and answered calls while my phone lit up over and over in the drawer beneath the printer tray. Mom, Dad, Mom, Mom, Dad, Chase. At 10:38, my mother left a voicemail. "Brooke, call me immediately." You have taken money that does not belong to you. If you do not correct this by noon, we will treat it accordingly. Treat it accordingly. She talked like a principal speaking into a parent conference. At 11:02, my father texted, "This is a serious error in judgment. Return half today." At 11:15, Chase sent, "What did you do? Dad is furious." I did not answer any of them. I called Talia on my lunch break from my car behind the office near the dumpster where the air smelled like wet cardboard and coffee grounds from the cafe next door. Talia was 2 years older than me, did payroll for a construction company, and had the practical soul of a woman who kept extra charger cords in labeled zip bags. She said, "Take screenshots of all of it. Put them in a folder. Do not respond while you are upset." So I did. I made a folder in Google Drive called October and uploaded every voicemail, every text, every receipt from the bank. I also texted Aunt Celia, "What did you mean Saturday?" She did not answer for 6 hours. At 5:43 that evening, she finally replied, "Your mother was in the study with Alan and Mark Hensley. I came in to get the pumpkin loaf recipe. I heard Alan say, 'Move 6 now and the rest after she signs the lease.' Denise said, 'Use the old iPad. She never checks it. I should have told you sooner.'" I read that text 4 times. I asked, "Will you say that if I need you to?" She did not answer. Silence is also a choice. It just takes some people longer to admit it. Tuesday morning, Halloween itself, I went to work, came home at 6:10, and found my father standing in the driveway beside his silver Ford F-150 with his arms folded. The sky was turning that weird purple-gray Florida gets right before dark. Kids were already out in costumes. Somebody down the street had one of those giant inflatable spiders that made a whining motor sound every time the wind shifted. My father said, "You need to transfer $7,400 back tonight." I said, "No." He said, "Half that money is household contribution that we covered for years." I said, "It is my paycheck money." He took one step closer and lowered his voice. "Do not become ugly over money, Brooke. You do not have the temperament to win ugly." That line stayed with me because it was so revealing. Not "you're wrong," not "we are hurt," win ugly. I walked past him into the house. My mother was at the stove stirring chili for trick-or-treaters because she liked feeding adults on the front porch and making the whole street admire her. She did not turn around when she said, "You have until tomorrow morning." I went to my room, shut the door, and emailed myself copies of everything again. Then I packed one suitcase, my laptop, my external hard drive, my social security card, my birth certificate, and the blue folder from Suncoast into the trunk of my 2014 Honda Civic. I did not sleep much. At 6:27 Wednesday morning, November 1st, I left for work early. At 8:51, while I was checking in a patient named Mrs. Haber for a crown prep, Officer Daniel Freites from the Lakeland Police Department walked into the lobby with another officer and asked for me by full name. Nothing about that moment felt dramatic. That is the part people never tell you. It felt administrative. A clipboard, a badge, mint disinfectant. The printer humming behind me, my manager, Sheila Benton, looked up from the insurance desk with her mouth slightly open. Officer Freites asked if we could speak outside, in the parking lot, with traffic moving steady on South Florida and the smell of hot asphalt already rising even though it was still morning. He told me my parents had reported that I had threatened to burn down their house the night before. He said they claimed I had said, "Maybe the only way you will understand is if the whole place goes up with you in it." He asked if I had somewhere else to stay because they wanted me trespassed from the property while the report was being reviewed. I said, "I never said that." He said, "I'm just here to document and explain your options." Options, that word, like there were several clean ones. Sheila asked me to step into her office when I came back in. She closed the door, folded her hands over a legal pad, and said, "Until this is clarified, I need to put you on unpaid leave. We handle controlled substances here, I hope you understand." I understood exactly what institutions do when they get frightened. They protect themselves first. I lost 6 shifts that week, $1,155 before taxes. I also lost the apartment, the leasing agent at Grove Park, a woman named Kendra Wallace with a bright pink manicure and a voice that always sounded rushed, called me at 1:14 that afternoon and said, "Because there is now an active police incident tied to your current residence situation, The property manager is rescinding approval. Your holding fee is non-refundable under the screening terms. I said, I have not been charged with anything. She said, I understand. I'm sorry. It is management. At 3:40, I sat in my Honda in the parking lot behind a Walgreens on Bartow Road and cried for exactly 7 minutes with the air conditioning blasting at full force because I did not know where else to go. Then I stopped, not because I felt better, because I was done wasting water on people who were making a record against me. If you have ever had your life turned into paperwork by someone who raised you, you know the kind of fear I mean, not the movie kind, the clerical kind, the kind with incident numbers and polite voices and missed paychecks. This is where a lot of women get pushed into defending themselves emotionally. I did not do that. I started building a file. I drove to a budget motel on Memorial Boulevard, called the Lakeview Inn, because it was one of the only places with a weekly rate under 400. The room smelled like bleach and old air conditioning filters. The comforter had that stiff, overwashed texture that catches on dry skin. I paid $387.12 for 5 nights. Then I paid $94 for a 10 by 5 storage unit at Orange Blossom Storage, because I knew if I left my things at the house, I might never see them again. That evening at 7:22, my Aunt Celia called me from her landline. I know it was her landline because her cell always came through as maybe scam, and the landline showed her full name. She said, I'm sorry. I said nothing. Then she said, your father asked Mark Hensley for help making screenshots. I sat up on the motel bed. What kind of screenshots? Text messages, he said. He needed it to show a pattern. Mark told him he could use one of those free mock-up sites if he changed the contact name and battery icon. I told him that was insane. Denise said they were documenting a safety issue. I wrote every word down on the back of a motel receipt with a pen that barely worked. I said, will you say that out loud to someone else? Long pause, then, I do not know. I thanked her anyway and hung up. Gratitude is not the same thing as trust. The next morning, Thursday, November 2nd, I called the records division at Lakeland Police and asked how to request the incident report and body cam once available. The woman who answered, Marisa Bell, sounded bored in a comforting way. She gave me the report number, 23-46178, and told me body cam could take several weeks. I paid $6.50 online for the initial report and printed it at the public library because I did not want one more thing going through my parents' Wi-Fi if they somehow still had device access. In the report, my mother claimed I was agitated over financial disputes. My father claimed I had a history of explosive statements. There were no prior calls, no prior incidents, just those phrases. Invented texture. That was the first thing that steadied me. Liars always overseason. Then I saw a line that made me stop. My father had told the officer there was a Ring camera covering the front entry and side walkway, but the battery had recently died. Our Ring camera was hardwired. I knew that because I had reset it myself in August after a storm knocked out the router. I drove straight to Talia's apartment in Brandon that afternoon. She met me in the parking lot wearing slippers and holding a legal pad. Talia was not a lawyer, but her sister Marin was, and in our circle that was close enough to become useful fast. We sat at her kitchen table, which always smelled faintly like garlic and laundry detergent, and spread out everything I had: bank receipts, voicemails, texts, the report, my lease deposit email, the motel receipt, the storage unit agreement. Talia called Marin on speaker. Marin was an employment attorney in St. Petersburg and also the kind of woman who says hard things cleanly. She listened for 10 minutes, then said, do not threaten them. Do not post online. Do not send one emotional paragraph. Pull records. Get your phone location timeline, your bank visit timestamp. And if there are fake screenshots, ask for originals by email so metadata exists. I said, how do I get them to send that? Marin said, you do not ask. You wait for them to use them. Then she added, also, if they really told police there was a fire threat and then asked their insurer anything related to coverage, someone in claims might care very much. That sentence turned out to be the hinge. I spent Thursday night and Friday morning making the neatest folder of my life. I downloaded my Google Maps timeline for October 31st. It showed I had gone from work to the house at 6:10 and left again at 7:58 to get gas at the racetrack on South Florida. I pulled the card transaction for $34.17. I got security footage request forms from the gas station manager who said they could not release video to me personally, but could preserve it if law enforcement asked. I printed my iPhone screen time logs showing the verification text from Suncoast on Friday night. I exported the voicemails as audio files and labeled them by date and exact time. I had been keeping that folder for 11 days by the time the first crack opened. On Monday, November 6th, at 9:14 in the morning, my manager Sheila called me and said, "Your mother just emailed us a screenshot." I asked her to forward it. She hesitated for 3 seconds, then did. It was fake. Not subtle fake, not good fake. The bubbles were slightly off-center, and my contact line read Brooke Home instead of what my parents would actually have had me saved as, which was just Brooke with a sunflower emoji my mother had added years ago. The supposed message said, "Maybe then you'll listen when it's Ash. Keep pushing me." The timestamp on the screenshot was 7:43 p.m. on Halloween night. The exact minute my card was being run at the racetrack register half a mile away while I bought gas and a pack of gum. I still had the receipt in my console. Sheila said quietly, "I thought you should see it before I replied." That mattered. A person deciding not to be used still matters, even late. I asked, "Can you tell me who sent it and from what address?" She said, "From your father's Gmail. He asked that it be added to your personnel file." I thanked her and drove to the library again to print the email headers with the full-time information. Then I called Marin. She said, "Good. Now we know they are dumb enough to put fabrication in writing." That afternoon, I also got a call from someone named Renee Calder at Peninsula Mutual Insurance. She said she was a property claims adjuster following up on a general inquiry tied to my parents' homeowner's policy. She was careful with her wording, so was I. She said, "I understand there may have been a reported threat involving potential fire damage at the residence on Easton Drive. I am trying to determine whether there has been any actual loss, any protective boarding, or any concern requiring documentation." I said there was no threat. My parents made a false police report after I moved my savings into my own account. There was a pause long enough for me to hear office noise on her end. Keyboard clicks, a copier, somebody laughing too loudly in a hallway. Then she asked, "Would you be willing to email me anything that supports that statement?" I said yes. I sent her the report, the bank receipts, the gas receipt, and one paragraph explaining I had been removed from the home based on a false claim after a dispute over access to my money. I did not editorialize, I just attached. By 5 that evening, Renee emailed back asking one more question. Did either insured ever mention replacing the kitchen after a fire event, or discuss whether previous wear would affect payout? I stared at that line in my inbox until the words sharpened. My father had been trying to get a kitchen renovation for 2 years. He had complained constantly about the warped lower cabinets and cracked tile near the dishwasher. 2 months earlier, he had gotten an estimate from a contractor for $28,400 and called it highway robbery. Now an adjuster was asking me if they had been discussing how previous wear would affect a fire claim. I called Talia immediately. She answered on the first ring and said, "Oh my God," not the shocked kind, the confirming kind. On Tuesday, November 7th, I went with Officer Freites to retrieve my belongings because he said it was better if there was a civil standby. We arrived at 11:06 in the morning. The house smelled like burnt coffee and lemon cleaner. My mother was in a cream cardigan, hair smooth, face fully done, as if she were receiving guests instead of standing in the middle of a lie. My father stayed in the den with his arms crossed. Officer Freites gave me 20 minutes. I went straight to my room. 2 drawers had already been emptied into trash bags. My jewelry box was gone. The external monitor from my desk was missing. So were the sealed envelopes where I kept paper tax returns from 2021 and 2022. I asked my mother, "Where are my tax documents?" she said. "If they were important to you, you should have been more orderly." I looked at the officer and said, "Can you note missing financial records and electronics from my room during retrieval?" He nodded and wrote something down. My mother said, very controlled, "You're not going to invent theft because you are embarrassed." I did not answer her. I took photos of every drawer, every shelf, every open closet space, time-stamped, wide angle, then close. My father watched from the hallway and said, "You are making yourself look unstable." I said, "Okay." That word infuriated him because it gave him nowhere to climb. As I carried the last box to my car, our next-door neighbor, Mrs. Noreen Sykes, stepped out of her side yard with pruning shears in one hand. She was 68, wore visor caps year-round, and missed nothing that happened on Easton Drive. She said, "Brooke, honey, your dad told the officer that camera was dead, but I saw him on a ladder by it after the police left. My heart started beating hard enough to make my fingers shake. I asked, 'What day?' She said, 'Wednesday before lunch.' Around 11:30, he had a little black case and kept looking over at my driveway like I was the problem. I asked if she would say that if needed. She looked at my mother through the open garage, then back at me, and said, 'If somebody asks me straight, yes.' That was the second crack. If you have ever watched the truth come in from the edges, you know it does not arrive all at once. One woman notices a ladder, another forwards an email. Somebody who stayed quiet too long finally says one accurate sentence. That is how false stories collapse, piece by piece. If this story is hitting something real for you, like and subscribe. It helps more than people think. And we are about to get to the part where my parents got too confident and started talking to the wrong professionals. On Friday, November 10th at 2:20 in the afternoon, Marisa Bell from police records called to say the body cam file from my removal day was available on a delay-approved basis. I paid $32 and got the download link by email. I watched it once in Talia's living room with my shoes still on and my purse on my lap because I could not relax enough to set anything down. The footage showed Officer Freites speaking with my parents on the porch, my mother hand to chest, saying, "We are frightened of our own daughter," my father saying she threatened fire specifically. Then in the background from inside the house, the ring chime sounding as someone moved past the front door, hardwired, active. 10 seconds later, my father said, "The front camera has been dead for weeks." I rewound and watched that part 3 times. Talia said, "There it is." No, their part of it was. I emailed the clip to Renee Calder at Peninsula Mutual and asked if she had requested any footage from the insured's door camera as part of her internal review. She replied 48 minutes later, "Yes, we requested all available security footage from October 31st and November 1st. Insured advised front unit was non-operational." I sent back the time-coded body cam note where the ring chime was audible. Renee did not answer that day. She did answer Monday morning. She wanted to meet. We met on Thursday, November 16th, at 3 o'clock in the small conference room of Peninsula Mutual's regional office in Winter Haven. The room smelled like toner and vanilla coffee creamer. There were fake ficus plants in 2 corners and a framed photo of boats no one would ever really look at. Renee Calder was in her 40s, with a straight brown bob and the steady face of someone trained not to react on behalf of a company. Beside her sat a man from their Special Investigations Unit named Victor Pell. Renee said, "I need to be careful with what I ask and what I share. But your parents made multiple contacts with our office after the police report, asking hypothetical questions about fire loss, temporary housing, smoke damage thresholds, and whether prior maintenance issues would be factored into replacement." I felt my hands go cold. Victor said, "On November 2nd, your father asked if a documented threat from a household member would support urgency of claim handling if an incident occurred. On November 3rd, your mother asked whether cabinetry already showing wear would still be replaced if smoke traveled through the downstairs." My mouth actually opened. I could not help it. Renee slid a one-page contact log across the table for me to review. Not to keep, just to read. Dates, times, staff initials, summary notes. My parents had called 4 times in 36 hours, then Victor asked, did either of them have actual grounds to think there would be a fire? I said no, they were angry because I moved my savings, and they sent my employer a fake screenshot to make me look dangerous. Renee and Victor looked at each other in the tiny, practiced way professionals do when they have just connected motive to a record without saying it out loud. I left that meeting with no dramatic speech, just confirmation. Sometimes that is enough. Sometimes one professional with a clean file note does more damage to a liar than any screaming ever could. 3 days later, on Sunday, November 19th, my cousin Aubrey called and asked if I was coming to Thanksgiving at my grandmother's house in Plant City. I laughed once because the idea seemed absurd. She said, "You should come. Mom says everyone is acting like this is unresolved confusion, and I think they need to hear something that isn't your mother." I told her I would think about it. What decided me was not family loyalty. It was Renee's voicemail on Tuesday, November 21st, at 10:18 a.m. MS Mercer. There may be a need for one of our representatives to attend in person if your parents continue making statements about insurance involvement that are inaccurate. Please call me. I called back immediately from the break room at work because I had finally been reinstated the day before. Sheila had listened to the fake screenshot issue, reviewed the body cam contradiction, and put me back on schedule with back pay for the 6 lost shifts. $1,155.70 was added to my next paycheck. It did not erase what happened, but it mattered. Renee said your mother contacted one of our supervisors and said the company was preparing emergency support because of a credible domestic threat and expected fire loss. That is not true. If she repeats that in a setting where clarification is necessary, we may clarify. I stood there with the smell of microwave soup and powdered creamer in the break room air and realized exactly what she meant. They were using the insurance company as a prop now. I said Thanksgiving. My grandmother's house there will be around 20 people. Renee was quiet for a moment, then said, if she references our company directly in a way that requires correction, I can have someone stop by because I'm in Hillsborough that day visiting family. That is the thing about people who lie for control. Eventually they cannot stop adding details. They start inviting witnesses. Thanksgiving was Thursday, November 23rd, 2023. My grandmother Lorraine Pike lived on a side street off North Collins in Plant City, in a one-story ranch house that always smelled like celery, old cookbooks, and the lavender sachets she tucked into linen drawers. I got there at 1:57 with a pumpkin pie from Publix and a folder in my tote bag. Not because I planned to make a scene, because I was done ever arriving undocumented. There were 21 people in the house. I counted from the doorway while taking off my shoes. Grandma Lorraine in her floral apron, Aunt Celia already slicing rolls, Aubrey and Noah setting drinks out in the sunroom. Chase on the couch looking at his phone with the face of a man hoping events would pass around him. My parents near the dining room, my mother in deep green, my father in a blue button-down pressed too sharply for family. No one hugged me first. That told me everything about the version of me they had already been hearing. For the first 40 minutes, things stayed brittle, but civil plates clinked. Football played low in the den. My grandmother asked if I wanted dark meat or white. My mother complimented the cranberry relish too loudly. My father stayed in conversation with Uncle Ray as if I were a weather system he had chosen not to discuss. At 3:08, while people were sitting down and passing sweet potatoes, my mother lifted her glass and said, "Before we begin, I just want to say we are thankful our family has remained strong through an extremely difficult safety issue this month. We have had support from law enforcement and from our insurance people, and I hope next year brings peace and better choices." There it was. She did not look at me when she said it. She looked at the center of the table, like a woman reading grace. The room went very still. You could hear a spoon hit china in the kitchen. My grandmother blinked twice. Aubrey stared at her plate. Chase rubbed his thumb against the edge of his napkin. Then the doorbell rang. Not loudly, just once, clean and ordinary. Aubrey got up to answer it, and a woman I had never met before stepped into the foyer wearing a navy coat over office clothes and holding a leather portfolio. Behind her stood Victor Pell from Special Investigations with his badge clipped to his belt. Aubrey looked back at the room and said, "She's asking for Denise or Alan Mercer." My mother rose halfway from her chair with that tight, polite smile she used with strangers she expected to manage. "Yes, I am Denise." The woman stepped into the dining room just enough to be heard by everyone and said, "My name is Renee Calder with Peninsula Mutual. I'm sorry to interrupt your holiday meal, but because our company has been referenced in a way that is inaccurate, I need to correct the record." No one moved. 21 people in absolute silence. Renee opened her portfolio and read from one page. Peninsula Mutual has not approved, discussed, or prepared emergency support for any fire-related loss at your Easton Drive residence because no fire loss occurred. We have, however, documented 4 calls from the insureds after a police report involving an alleged threat, in which coverage for a potential fire event and replacement of pre-existing kitchen damage was specifically discussed. My father said, "Brooke." He only got that far. Renee kept going. Not unkindly, just professionally. Because of conflicting statements regarding security footage, reported threat details, and subsequent coverage inquiries, The file has been referred for internal fraud review, and all claim-related activity is frozen pending that review. My mother made a sound that was not quite a laugh. Just one quick exhale through her nose. Then she sat very still. Victor added, "We are not here to debate. We are here because your company was mentioned and the statement was false." That was it. No lecture, no performance, just the right people in the right room. My Aunt Celia put her fork down. You could hear the metal touch the plate. Then she said, looking at no one and everyone, "I heard Alan say on October 28th to move $6,000 first and the rest later. I also heard him ask Mark how to make screenshots." My father turned to her so slowly it almost looked careful. He said, "Celia, do not do this." She answered, "I already did not do enough. There are silences that feel awkward. There are silences that feel holy." This one felt like evidence settling. My grandmother Lorraine, who had said nothing for almost 2 minutes, looked at my mother and asked in the calmest voice I have ever heard, "Did you tell police your daughter threatened to burn your house down?" My mother did not answer immediately. She smoothed her napkin once. Then she said, "We believed she was unstable." Renee closed the portfolio. "That is not the same answer." No one at that table would ever be able to unknow what they had just heard. I did not speak. I did not need to. The point of documenting is so the truth can survive your silence. If you have ever imagined the moment the room finally understands who you really are and who they really are, let me tell you something honest. It does not feel joyful. It feels quiet. It feels expensive. It feels like getting your own face back after people borrowed it for a month and tried to ruin it. There was still one more part, and it cost them in ways they actually cared about. Renee and Victor left after less than 4 minutes. My mother did not try to stop them. My father stood up like he might follow, then sat down again. Chase got up and walked into the backyard without a word. Aunt Celia started crying in that small, embarrassed way of women who think tears are an inconvenience to others. My grandmother said, "No one eats until this is spoken plainly," so it was. My father tried first. There was concern about Brooke's state of mind after she emptied money from an account tied to this household. I said, "It was my paycheck money." He said, "That is debatable." Then Aubrey, who had been quiet for weeks, reached into her tote bag and put printed screenshots on the table. Not mine, her own. Uncle Alan texted me on November 2nd and said Brooke had sent specific written threats. I asked for proof, and he sent me that fake screenshot. I compared it to the real messages from her. The font spacing is wrong. Even then, my mother tried reasonableness. "Aubrey, this is not helpful." Aubrey said, "I was a brand manager for 3 years. I look at edited images for a living." My grandmother turned to my father. "Did you forge a message?" He did not answer. She turned to my mother. "Did you lie to police?" My mother said, "We were trying to protect our home." And there it was. Not remorse. Strategy. I left 23 minutes later with my pie still untouched in the fridge and my appetite gone for the rest of the day. The concrete prices started arriving in December. On Monday, December 4th, Officer Freights called to tell me a supplemental report had been added after inconsistencies were raised, including the fake screenshot and the contradiction about the front camera. He could not tell me everything over the phone, but he did say the matter had been referred for review of false reporting. In January, both of my parents were charged with giving false information to law enforcement during an investigation. Misdemeanor charges, not dramatic TV charges. Real ones anyway. They each had to hire separate attorneys because the insurance issue created conflicting interests. My father paid $4,800 for his retainer. My mother paid $3,900. Peninsula Mutual sent them a reservation of rights letter on December 12th and then non-renewed their homeowner's policy effective at the end of the term. Their next replacement policy through a higher risk carrier cost $6,460 more for the year. I know because Chase called me in February sounding half horrified, half impressed, and said Dad is losing his mind over the premium. The internal fraud review also closed with no payout, obviously, and a note in their file that followed them when they tried to shop for new coverage. At work, I got my back pay and was offered an extra Saturday shift rotation because Sheila said, "You handled a terrible situation with more composure than people twice your age." By March, I had saved enough again, even after the motel and storage and the lost deposit. On March 9th, 2024, I signed a lease on a one-bedroom in Winter Haven off Cypress Gardens Boulevard. Not glamorous, clean, quiet, my own mailbox. There was one more loss my parents felt, and I think it stung them the most. My grandmother changed her emergency contact paperwork, her medical proxy, and the access list for her checking account in January. She removed both of my parents from everything, not in some dramatic inheritance move, in the daily life move that says I no longer trust you near my forms. She put Aunt Celia first and me second. My mother found out during a routine appointment when the receptionist at Watson Clinic asked if she was still authorized and then said, "I'm sorry, I show that changed on January 9th." That is the kind of consequence liars never plan for. Not money, access. As for Mark Hensley, my father's friend who had suggested the mock-up site, his wife Rita stopped speaking to my parents after Thanksgiving. Talia later told me Rita said, "I thought Denise was snide. I did not know she was criminal." Small-town social fallout is not legal justice, but it is still a bill. People ask sometimes if I ever got an apology. Not a real one. In April, my mother mailed me a two-paragraph card on cream stationery that said, "We regret that misunderstandings were amplified by outside parties." That is not an apology. That is a woman still trying to sound taller than the facts. My father texted me once in June, "This family can recover if you stop retelling private matters publicly." I never answered. The truth is not gossip just because it embarrasses the people who created it. I speak to Chase now maybe once every 6 weeks. He is trying in the underdeveloped, late way some men try once consequences become too obvious to ignore. He admitted in May that our father told him on the day after I moved my money, "Sometimes you have to make one child look unstable to keep the house from turning against you." Chase said he did not understand what that meant at the time. I think he did, partly. I think not understanding is often just a more flattering story people tell about their own silence. Aunt Celia and I have lunch every other month at a place in Plant City that serves chicken salad on croissants and overbrewed iced tea. She still says she is sorry. I let her say it. I do not rush to comfort her. She earned the discomfort. She also eventually told the truth. Both things are real. As for me, I keep better accounts now. Separate bank, separate cloud storage, paper copies in a fire safe. I changed every password, every recovery email, every security question. I learned what my life costs when I have to rebuild it from a motel room. 400 for the first 5 nights, 94 for storage, 1,950 lost on an apartment I never got to live in, 32 for body cam footage, $6.50 for the report that proved where the lie started. There's a number for every stage of what they did. That is what I want women listening to understand. Abuse that uses institutions is not less personal because it comes with forms. In some ways, it is more personal. It means they studied what could hurt you and picked the version that would make other people doubt you too. I won quietly, but I did win. My parents now have a police record tied to a false statement about their own daughter. They pay more for insurance because an adjuster wrote down exactly what they asked and when they asked it. My grandmother took their names off the documents that mattered. And I live in a place where no one has a key except me. I do not forgive them. Not the cinematic kind. Not the healing slogan kind. Some damage stays structural. When your own mother can say into a microphone that you would burn her house down, she is not having a bad moment. She is showing you the shape of her mind. Sometimes I think about that Halloween party. The smell of cider. The cheap devil horns digging into my scalp. The exact hush after she said it. What I know now is that the party was not the beginning. It was just the first public draft. The real story was in the records they thought no one would line up side by side. I did, and that is why they lost.